Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. As you can tell, today I made the choice. I think I've got something to offer you in terms of that little story that's just running around in your brain, something you've had maybe for a year, maybe a decade, maybe even more than that. But you're like, man, I don't write movies. I just love to watch them, but I sure wish I could. Reason why I chose to make this video was based on one observation within myself. I have had this conversation with tons of folks at cigar lounges, and that goes from lounges in Vegas, California, Texas, other places, and especially older guys. Because initially they're like, you should write one about me. How much does it cost? And they'll get interested in it. But then they want to know if you're qualified. And I said, okay. So I go through my process. And they start feeling better and better and better. I even mentored one guy to get started on his own. You see, there's gatekeepers out there, and they're assholes. They can also be your best friends at the same time. But they're so jealous of the idea that you might come up with a story that they haven't thought of, and that you might actually get signed, and they've been trying for years, that they want to kind of keep the process of writing a screenplay a complete mystery. And that sucks. And I'm completely the opposite kind of guy. I think your story is the thing that no one else has access to. It's in your head, right? It's in your head. Maybe you've done a little note here and there. Don't be afraid of little notes. My friend Sid Mead, he has designed the most amazing futuristic stuff on the back of a napkin. Walked into a meeting, threw the napkin down and goes, this is what I'm thinking. And they're like, go. Here's the money. I've taught this to students at Chapman University. I've taught it at Noman Film and Television Video Game School. I've taught it online here several times. But I will tell you that my skill set in the last, I'd say 5 years has at least doubled, if not tripled, in sort of the way to make the story better once we get past the sort of logistics of it all. There's a great book out there called The Story Architecture. Brooks, I think is his name. Highly recommend that book. Oh my goodness. I used to think Robert McKee's book Story was the de facto Bible. And we'll explain that because McKee's book is more about the words that you use, i.e. nomenclature that you're going to have to learn when you go in to do a pitch with a true agency, somebody in Hollywood that's trying to bust your balls to see if you, how much do you know screenwriting? How much have you researched? If I say the negation of the negation, do you know what I'm talking about? Those are kind of jerk-off ways of testing whether or not you know something, but it's okay. We're going to get you to write a great story. I guarantee you, you have a great story in you. I guarantee you. If it's not your life, it's someone else's life, it's something you've imagined, it's two movies that could be Xanadu together, take a little bit apart from that one, a little one from that one. But I'm going to share with you what I have gathered over the last, I'd say, 2 years, reading a ton of books, getting ready to write my book. But all of it folds back to screenwriting. And a lot of screenwriting folds back to novel writing. So where do you start? Where do you start, Well, I would have struggled to answer that question with any major detail until I read Story Architecture. And now I can give you a few little steps so that you know where you are in your process. The first thing you start off with is an idea. And it is the most generic thing ever. An idea is like, I got an idea. I think I want to do like a space movie. Space movie, it's like way in the past. Or it's a haunted house movie. I just have the idea of a haunted house movie. An idea of this, that, or the other thing. You have no concept yet. The concept is the next thing you're going to have. The concept is you kind of have a hook, One of the best movies to explain screenwriting with is Terminator 1. Because everyone's seen it. Even if you're young, you've seen that movie. And it's a real great way to show the evolution that might actually end up occurring when you are about to write your film. What would be the idea of Terminator 1? Some futuristic robots kind of take over the world. Okay, that's kind of an idea. Yeah, I like it. So what's going to make that interesting? Where are we going here? Concept. Well, here's what I was thinking. The humans are fighting the robots in the future. And that somehow in the middle of a catastrophe, apocalypse, they find the machine to go back in time. So one of the robots goes back in time to kill a guy that's going to become the resistance in the future. That's a concept. It's getting really close to a premise. Some might say that is the premise, except it's not quite interesting enough just yet. I would say the premise goes one step further. The robot goes in the past, and you find out that the guy that he's trying to kill, the guy isn't even born yet. So he's going after the mother, Sarah Connor, right? But at this point, we don't know if Sarah has a name. We just know robot from the future is going back in the past to kill a woman that's going to give birth to the resistance bloodline. All right, we're getting there. We're getting pretty good. Now, you go a couple more weeks and you're like, okay, that's pretty darn good, but that sounds like he's just going to kill her and that's going to be the end of the movie. So how do we provide some help to her? I mean, we could build her up 100% to be able to figure out that he's arrived. She gets sort of a lucky set of circumstances in her house where she avoids getting killed by him. And then she's got some weird paramilitary background where she can actually fight this invincible machine off. It starts to get muddy, doesn't it? So the screenwriters took it the next level and they said, all right, here's what we're going to do. There's a dude in the future who's human, who knows this little plan. He's going to send himself back and he's going to protect her from that robot. All right, now we got some meat on those bones. Now we got something to work with. It's a premise. It's all the mechanics of this story. The screenwriter could even go to the level of the twist. What's the big twist? I think it's probably in the center of the film. If I were to tab about 60 minutes in that film, I bet you that the guy that comes back sleeps with Sarah Connor, and we realize that she's going to probably get pregnant by that little interlude, and that he is actually the father of the kid that he's trying to come back and protect via Sarah Connor. That's a good twist, huh? All right. So the idea turned into a concept, turned into a premise, and then you need a story. What is a story? And what's the difference? The story is the layer on top of the premise that makes you care about any of this stuff happening. I mean, you could probably say, well, the premise is kind of got humanity at stake, right? If this doesn't happen right, then we don't know what happens in the future. They're still fighting in that beginning of the T1 movie, right? That incredible beginning. Maybe the humans win. Maybe they don't win. Everyone has setbacks and things. The Union lost against the Confederacy at the beginning of the Civil War, but it didn't end that way. All right. So Sarah Connor obviously has to be a human being that we can relate to. The guys should be handsome. The girls should be beautiful, but they should also have some meat on the bones, right? They should be, she's kind of buff a little bit. She gets way more buff in the second movie, but she doesn't do too bad in the first one. Cock that shotgun with one hand. Boom. You have to have a landscape. Where does she live? Oh, Los Angeles. That's awesome. So you have a lot of real estate to play with. But you also should probably have something else just kind of neato on the side. And that inherently comes when Arnold Schwarzenegger comes back. He looks human, doesn't he? And then he kind of gets in trouble. He gets his eye hurt, goes to the bathroom. We already see his HUD, his heads up display. He's definitely a robot. That's kind of cool. He's assessing the room. Give me your clothes, right? And then he gets injured and you find out, the ectoskeleton thing or the endoskeleton's just inside, right? And that doesn't seem to be hurting at all. So kind of the subplot watching of this film is just learning his capabilities. And of course, in T2, it gets insane, right? The liquid metal dude. Brilliant. Had they not screwed up the casting on the kid, T2 would be way better than T1. But due to the kid, it's not as good. The effects are better, but the film isn't as stunning, right? Stunning for your brain on the story side. But I'm telling you that we're going to learn how to write film. So I need to kind of get that out of the way. That allows you to assess how far you're along in the process. Do you have anything that's related to a story? A lot of times people might write part of a story, got a really touching little scene in their brain, but they don't have any architecture. Well, what's the story about? You got that really cool little scene you wrote down. You don't have your premise finished. Well, that's cool. That's all right. It's all okay. Just pull back to the premise. Knock out the architecture of what you're trying to write here. Try to get the ending figured out first. There are some writers, almost none. Stephen King's one, but he fails every once in a while, if not a lot, with, I don't know what I'm writing. I just start writing in my word processor. But he taught English and he's read a lot and he's written a lot. So he can kind of start subconsciously writing the ending as he's going towards it. But with movies, you'll have people. The first time I gave out one of my movies to a professional cult level director, right? I mean, like cult classic director. He just took my script, went 2 or 3 pages, flipped it to the end, read through the last part, handed it back to me and goes, "It's too long. It's overwritten. Knock out more than 20 pages, 25 pages. Get this thing locked down." And he was right, 100% right. But I want you to get off moving fast, right? So here we go. Now, there's an old philosophy of how we refer to the acts in a movie, and then there's the more modern philosophy that's probably 25 years old now. The old system was a 3-act movie. The new system is a 4-act movie. Same exact length in terms of pages, but these acts are different. They're different sizes now. Act 1's always been 30 pages. Every page that you write in a screenplay equals 1 minute. It didn't used to be that way. When they did Casablanca, I think the script was way over 120 pages, but a film way shorter than 120 pages. Because why? We had higher IQs and we spoke faster. We understood when someone was just rattling stuff off. Now we speak so slow that virtually every YouTube video you can play at 1.2. Almost every audiobook should be 1.5, and it starts to sound like normal dialogue. It's crazy. But the 3X system goes like this: 30 pages, 60 pages, 30 pages. And that was really made popular by obviously the people that did it for 40 years. But a guy named Sid Field in the mid 80s to mid 90s wrote tons of books. I read them all. I know them all. And that really screwed me up. The 60-page Act 2 was too much for my brain to really kind of synthesize together. And apparently I wasn't the only person that found that really rough on the mind. The theory is this: at page 30, you will find that you can go to movies, tab to 28 minutes, and the end of Act 1 is right there in minute 29 or 30. The big crescendo of why you bought the ticket in the first place is happening at page 30. It might be Elliot meeting E.T. And then with the 3X system, you have the 60-page center act where they put all this emphasis on the 60th page in the center of that act. And that's when you take everything that you've taught the viewer and you twist it and you turn everything upside down on its head. Then you finish the last 30 pages of Act 2. And then Act 3 can be however many pages it takes to end your script. Up to 30 pages, up to 30 minutes. A lot of times you'll hand in a script that's 105 pages, but it's going to blast out to over 2 hours. You're just basically letting the studio know the big ending. They can pad that thing, add a whole lot more to your script. If you don't want your script to be changed, you should have one ready that's 100% what you're thinking. Hand in a slightly shorter one, and if you get some traction on it, you give your agent the big one, and you go, well, here's the whole story. I just wanted to whet your appetite, and apparently they're interested. And then the bigger one will get read. But in order to solve the problem of the second act being so huge and so confusing, the way that Sid and these previous folks wrote it, we just took it and cut it in half. So now it's Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, all 30-minute segments. Again, you can go a little bit shorter if you need to on Act 4. I'm not going to say that again. So now it's much easier to teach. If I say to the students, hey, by at least the 30th page of your first act, you need to make sure that everyone who parted with money to sit in that seat knows exactly why they parted with that money, and they feel very comfortable and excited about that decision. With the movie Stargate, it's when Kurt Russell finally went through the gate and went to the other side, and where the movie fell apart. But Act 2, now you have a very clear goal. We're to build up to this point, because it's all a big pyramid. It all builds up to the center. It goes up to that midpoint of the film, which used to be called the midpoint of Act 2. Old thinking. So now the end of Act 2 is where you're going to turn everything. Everything they thought they knew about the film, what they thought they knew about the good guy or the bad guy, can take a gigantic turn. It reinvigorates the entire storyline in the entire thing. Now we have third act. And what's the third act all about? Well, the third act's kind of about all is lost. You're learning everything you need to know, roughly, to solve the problem that's at hand, except everything falls apart. How many movies have you felt that this is formulaic writing? You're more than welcome to tear it up and make it a lot better. Hollywood loves it when you change the formulas, as long as it's easy to understand and it gets everybody to the emotional point they want to be at. But it's pretty hard to make everyone feel like everything's great at the end of Act 3 when you have to resolve it in Act 4. It should be fairly clear to the viewer what's got to happen as a minimum in Act 4, the final act. We're going to wrap up this whole battle scene or whatever it is. Everything's a battle in Act 4, even if it's an emotional battle, even if it's just about a kid who's going to school and someone's torturing him mentally. He's not going to pull a gun out, but he's going to intellectually go to the debate and kick all the kids' asses, right? With Jack Nicholson and the big court scene he did, You Can't Handle the Truth, right? Wasn't a fight, but it was a fight, you know? So we'll loop back on all of what needs to happen in these acts and how you're going to write them and all the details. But let's get you started. Let's just get you started right away. And you can do this with a pen and paper. You could do it in a word processor, but you'll forget it, just so you know. This is a technique I got from George Lucas. I don't know if he got it from someone else, but he went to film school. He's friends with Coppola. Maybe Coppola does this too. It's such a simple technique. So remember, we've gone through the idea, concept, premise, and story. You think you got some pretty good understandings of what this is. Good. Don't worry if you don't have it all. We'll get to that point. It's an iterative process, okay? But what you do to write all 4 acts is you create 12 bullets. You know, you go into your word processor and you hit the bullet button. You type in Act 1, carriage return down, hit the bullet thing in your word processor of choice, and start writing scene titles. Different scenes that need to occur to finish Act 1. Then carriage return out of that. Write Act 2, same thing. It's so much easier with pencil and paper, or pen and paper. But get yourself 48 bullets separated by acts, okay? If you can get that far and you read your Act 4 especially, you got a good ending, oh boy. The second you have a good setup and a good ending, don't worry about the middle. The middle will write itself. I'm going to give you lots of tricks to get this done. Tricks I didn't have up my sleeve when I made the last, 8 episodes about this. This is an all-in-one episode. This is a one-and-done episode. So just to reiterate, you want to make sure your Act 1, or your first 12 bullets are phenomenal, clear, accessible, easy to understand for the audience, right? And your fourth act, don't worry about necessarily what you said in your first act or any of the other acts. In fact, you might just leave the second and third acts just empty at first. Go down to the fourth act and make it up. Literally, you can write a movie from writing the fourth act bullets first. You don't even have a movie. You just think of the coolest conclusion to a film that has ever been made, and then reverse engineer it back to the beginning. Hollywood only cares about the end of the film. Now, that's not saying that they don't care about everything that goes up to that point. But if you give them an ending that blows their mind, here's the cool thing. They can hire people if you screw up the first 3 acts to fix whatever you've done. Those endings are everything. Think about every film, how you've ever judged a film in your lifetime. It's usually the ending. Star Wars, oh my goodness, they blew up the Death Star, right? Huge. But now, let's talk about the pyramid. The pyramid, I always kind of do this hand gesture, and I know pyramids have a different meaning in the world these days, but this is a good one. So your Act 1 starts heading towards the top of the pyramid. Act 2 finishes the journey to the top of the pyramid, the parameridian stone at the top, right? Then it starts going down equally towards Act 4. And Act 4 takes you back to the baseline. All is well. Or all is changed, but all is well. So one of the hardest things these books that you'll read really fail to describe is this massive turn in the center of the story. I'm going to give you a trick. One of the ways you could think about that big turn at the end of Act 2, it's page 60 in your script. It's minute 60 in your film in an ideal situation. It doesn't even matter how much further the film goes. Usually around the midpoint of the movie, you get this big bump. It's a lie that's been resolved, is all it is. You've lied to the viewer. Okay. I told my students once, I said, look, they were trying to figure out this whole thing, and I was sitting there thinking about an easy way to cheat if it wasn't obvious how to make this thing occur. And I said, well, imagine you're writing a Sherlock Holmes novel. There's a lot of clues and mystery and all that good stuff. A lot of misdirection, right? It's just like magicians, right? Look over here. I'm flopping this card with this other card. It's got a hole in it so I can stick the marker through it. It's a lie that's resolved. But now once lies happen, there's always a process of undoing them. They don't just undo because someone learns the truth. It's just you brought a gun to a knife fight. You brought a knife to a gunfight. You know, whatever it is, you need to get the right weapon to finish off whatever the conflict is, right? So one of the ways you can do it, if you're locked, or if you've got a script right now and you're like, I don't have that turn. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, right? Write the script in the bullet form to the point you're just driving straight to the conclusion without any neat twists, without any neat turns, without a lie. Hollywood would consider that a flat exhibition movie, right? You're not really making any emotions occur. Everybody knows exactly everything that's happening all the way through. Okay. Do that first. Remember, talking about 48 bullets, right? So you got 24 bullets in the second half and 24 bullets in the first half. So write all of them straight towards the target because you don't know what your turn is. Then go back to that midpoint of all your bullets and start lying all the way back to the beginning. Just take everything that you've told the viewer straight up. This is the way it is. It was so easy to get all these things done in the script, and start causing problems and twisting everything back. Or if you really want to do it right, you go from the beginning and start lying towards that point. Sometimes it's easier to start in the middle and go back up to the top and then reiterate back down. That creates a big lie that's going right towards that turn. And then everything else you've already written just needs to turn into how they discovered everything was screwed up all the way to the end. And you'll build your pyramid level down. Once you get into it, all that'll make sense to you. Hopefully, if you listen to this and you've got a little idea in the back of your head, just apply everything I'm saying as if we're having a one-on-one session and I'm talking about your idea right now. I just don't know exactly what words to say because I don't know exactly what you've got going. Hopefully, you can start seeing that idea just percolate in your head. Every single one of you has a movie in you. Guarantee it. And if it doesn't work as a movie, write the movie first, then turn it into a book. Books are a little bit more lengthy, but the cool thing is there's no limit. You can just write as many pages as it takes to tell your story. But movies are a fabulous way to get all the architecture down, the kind of ins and outs, bits and pieces, the hand bones connected to the arm bone kind of theory. So what are these bullets called in Hollywood? I mean, what are they? Are they scenes? Are they beats? Are they sequences? Well, typically, any one of the bullets that you've written in your little outline is a sequence. It's a sequence of scenes. What are scenes? Pretty much every single time the camera is changing and the circumstances are changing to fit in about a 4 to 8 minute moment. Heck, it could be nothing more than a 2-minute scene. 2 pages, and you're done with one of your bullets. Or another bullet's going to take 4, and another bullet's going to take 6, and maybe for some big moment, it might take 8 pages. Again, you only have 30 before you finish the act, so just kind of keep your economy going, right? But sequences are a group of scenes. Scenes are a group of beats. Beat is pretty much one thing that's happening, a piece of dialogue, a pause in the script. Those are all beats. Now, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Well, beats have one other thing you need to know about. Beats have charges, like positive and negative. What's that mean? Well, let's write a really bad scene real quick without the change in polarity, what they call positive and negative. Guy walks into a room. Hey, Bob, how you doing? And John says, Bob, hey, I had a great weekend. Well, that's great. What did you do? I had a great thing happen to me too. Well, I had some great things. Let's go have a great day. Let's have a great lunch. Boring, unless it's a comedy. Unless it's a comedy, you can pull those kind of things off. It's absurd that anyone would write a scene where everything that's happening is just jovial and amazing. Unless maybe you're doing a really intense little wind-up for something else that's going to occur real soon here. But typically what Hollywood wants to see And the way that they can just read your script a little bit, which seems impossible, and judge whether or not you're a good writer that they should continue reading, is they read the dialogue. The dialogue should switch polarities. Every other thing that's said should flip the polarity just a little bit, if not a lot. Okay? So let's redo the scene. So Bob's talking to John. How's your weekend, man? Oh, man, it sucked, dude. Oh, I'm sorry about what's happened there. Is this something with your old lady? No, man. Way worse than that. Oh, we got a little mystery here. Now you're interested. Remember, making something interesting is just mystery. That's all it is. The only things you've ever been interested in your entire life were mysteries. Stanley Kubrick always said, anyone can write dialogue and write a movie, but can they make it interesting? Too much exhibition in the world. That previous scene I just told you about, the bad one where it's all positive all the way down, Hollywood execs, agents, they immediately say, it's exhibition. You're just talking for the sake of talking. Nobody's interested, right? So you're expected in a sequence of scenes to flip the beats, to flip the polarity of the beats back and forth. And at the very end of that sequence of one of your bullets, typically, while you're setting things up to go bad, when you're setting things up to have an issue, again, it doesn't have to be murder or anything. It could be ET. There's two things that go negative in a row. So what those two negative beats do, it's something you're putting a pin in. You're saying this is something that needs to be resolved because the guy couldn't dig his buddy out of his bad day. Hopefully that makes sense. Remember when I said to you, executives might come up to you and say, what's the negation of the negation? That is a Robert McKee term that talks about the two beats that went bad. A beat that goes bad is called a negation. Two beats in a row that go bad is the negation of the negation. Now, theoretically speaking, you could have three in a row. Technically speaking, you could have four in a row, but that would be at the point where you might want to take the meat of, if you have that much bad stuff happening, you might want to move it to the next sequence and demonstrate how it went even worse. Breaking Bad is a perfect example. They try to do something and it gets screwed up, and then you have this double failure. Then they start a new sequence where it's like, well, I don't know if we got the chemical to make the drug, and they go to the next one. We got to steal the chemical from that warehouse, and they try to do it. They get it, but it's leaving traces behind where the cops can find, some little scent to try to chase them down. Okay. Now let's go back to that midpoint where we got to lie. We got to turn it and lie. I'll make it real simple for you. You got two police officers trying to solve a crime. Some warehouse is being stolen or being ripped off. There's something else going on. You probably see this coming a mile away. But police officers are typically supposed to be good, and you can portray them as absolutely law-abiding citizens, and it's going great. We basically set up the entire brilliance of whatever the crime is. The crime is new, and these cops are on it, and that's really the end of Act 1 is these two cops are trying to solve this really wild crime that is not being fully explained to the listener, to the viewer, right? So they're, oh my God, what happened? That was wild. The casino got totally ripped off, and there was no Ocean's 11 dudes anywhere. They got all the way through security. And all these checks and stuff passed, and everyone's accounted for. Everyone who works at the casino is accounted for. All the cameras show no one walked through. And they're impervious to the loop thing that happens with cameras. How did they get in? How did they get out? Almost looks supernatural. So you manifest that. Then at the center of this film, one of the cops is really bad. And he has skills that relate to a background that you knew nothing about, except it was kind of hinted at the beginning. Something about, what did you do beforehand? I worked in Dev Group, and, you were at SEAL, huh? Yeah, you worked for Intel. Yeah, we had lots of toys back then, da-da-da-da. Turns out he used one of the toys from Dev Group to pull off casino heists. But he's also sharing it with his agency, so they also help out because it's a bunch of liquid money that goes out there off the books. I'm just making this up as I go along. So now you got a cop that's like, oh my God, I'm just a little tiny squirt guy. I found this out about my friend, and for whatever reason, he doesn't know that I found out. You finish Act 3. By the end of Act 3, because we're about to have Act 4, where all gets resolved, what's all is lost? Well, they find out that he knows. and they capture him. And he's in handcuffs on a chair, and he's not John Wick. But because we bought a ticket, and typically movies aren't about crime pays, it's about crime doesn't pay, he's going to make it out. And that's what they're going to pay you for. How the hell did this guy get out of that chair handcuffed? What serendipitous thing's going to happen? So, and it's not going to be a Deus Ex Machina, which is a thing that the Greek writers used to have, where they would pin all the characters down into the end of the movie, or into the stage play, and then God would typically show up and solve the problem. And everybody who went home, that worked for a little while, but it got to the point where it was cheating. It was like, well, of course, God can just show up at any point in time and fix all the problems. So they're going to pay you to undo this quagmire you've developed, right? What would have been the script before my technique with the students that couldn't figure it out? Would have been, hey, man, I'm a criminal and I'm going to rob this casino. You want to see how it's done? Oh, yeah, sure. I can't participate in it, but I'll definitely support you, man. And maybe it'd be a getaway guy. I don't know. And it goes all the way to the center, and it just keeps going to the very end, where the guy maybe has a change in his conscience. I can't let you rob casinos, one of those kind of things. But instead, you go to the middle point, and you lie all the way back. He found out that he was part of this special group. And then every fact that you wrote down has to indicate that that's what you understand, right? And this is very formulaic, I understand, but you'll be surprised how much money you can make writing this technique. Now, if you write for 10,000 hours, you can start breaking this up. If you're really clever, you can break it from the first script that you ever write. And hey, don't ever believe you can't do that. Just understand you're getting into risky territory if you do that. No problem with it, because there's no rules. Write the best story you can possibly imagine. But now let's talk about on-point and off-point dialogue, because this is why Tron Ares was the worst movie you've ever seen in your life. Whatever's obvious in the scene does not need to be said. And again, what's really supposed to happen is you're supposed to show all the action. But one of the worst pieces of dialogue would be just two people talking, and it's all just literal, and no one's trying to deceive anybody. There's no metaphor. There's no symbology. A guy comes home late from work. He's weaseling in about 11:30. It's cold outside. He's putting his jacket up. Maybe it's the late 50s or whatever. And his wife is up. And he notices, she's usually in bed by 9. And she's kind of up, and she's in her robe. And maybe she's smoking a cigarette or whatever. Hey, honey, working late again, are you? Yeah. They're really grinding me. This overtime is just killing me. Well, I was thinking about that. I was thinking where we should go on our vacation this year. What? Vacation? What are you talking about? Well, you're working so much overtime. I mean, I've been keeping track of how much overtime you've been working. I know that check's going to be huge. And hey, all of our bills are paid. It's going to be great. We're going to have all that extra cash. We don't have any kids in college. Let's go on that vacation. Can't wait. In fact, I've been telling all my friends how you're going to take me on that trip to Europe we always talked about. The dude starts sweating. Well, I don't know how much money it's really going to be in the. No, I know how much money you make. I remember that the last, 5 years ago this happened. That's how we have the new TV. What's really going on in the scene here? Is she really talking about going on a vacation? No. She knows he's cheating. She knows there's no overtime. No matter how good he is at keeping the lipstick off of him, the perfume off of him, he has just been out with the lady. Or even maybe lesser. He's been gambling with his buddies, playing a poker game, meaning they actually have less money than even the base money. And she's calling his bluff. Well, how exciting would it have been had he come home and she goes, "What the hell are you doing coming home this late?" "What do you mean, honey?" "I know you're cheating on me with that tramp." "I'm not cheating on you." "Yes, you are." "What, you got overtime?" Let's go look at the bank account, because last time I checked it, we're down $100. It's like $19.50. That's $1,000, right? Or $500, right? That's dead on point dialogue. It's got some drama in it. but it's not it's not tense, it's not tension, and it doesn't reward the viewer with any brain cells. That's the kind of dialogue you want to write. Insinuate things, right? Create a little mystery around it. And if you just keep that little example I gave you in your mind, a guy comes home cheating. His wife doesn't call him out directly. She pinpoints the lie. If you're working overtime, you'd be making extra money. And that extra money, given the fact we don't have any major debt, that's going to turn into a vacation. In fact, I've told all my friends, calls them out. Keep that in the back of your head as you write any scene in the entire world. How can you take what is obvious and push it down and then talk about it at some weird, symbolic, metaphorical way? Trap the other character. It gets really interesting really fast. Any piece of dialogue that you write that seems trivial, just make sure you come back and rewrite it. And you will. Now let's talk about the gap. This is a Robert McKee term. It's a term that will get thrown around all the time if you get into the professional world, unless your uncle's like Steven Spielberg and you can just give it to him, right? If you have to explain or debate your script, they're going to ask you about gaps, or they're going to say, oh, it's a really good gap you wrote there. What's a gap? It's super simple, and it's the rule of writing any movie. This is what I teach my students. I say, look, if a guy was standing on one side of the street and we make it obvious he wants to get the coffee across the way, he's just groggy. He checks the cup in his apartment, and he's like, oh, it's flat. Oh, God. And we see coffee on it, right? So he puts it down. He looks out the window of the coffee shop to see the line. To see it's really good. The line's not bad. It's 10:30 in the morning. He just basically puts on enough clothes so he doesn't get busted for indecent exposure, slides down that staircase, and he's got to go across the street to get that coffee. A gap is he cannot make it across the street easily. In a film, what's going to take place? Well, a bunch of stuff can take place. This is where your imagination just goes crazy. He tries to go across the street, gets hit by a car. Whoever hits him in that car is real important. Could be a girl running from a gangster. Could be a bank robbery's gone on. Could be he's not even the main character and he dies and the person who hits him is the main character. Could be that the coffee shop explodes because of a terrorist act or some crazy gas leak or something. You must create gaps. And the character, noticing the gap or encountering the gap, has got to figure out a different way to get across the street. Now, of course, in those extreme examples, you probably didn't care about a cup of coffee at all. But whatever your character is supposed to do, they can't just be allowed to do it. You can't just go to the crime lab and just get a solution. You can give them the solution at the crime lab, but whatever they thought they were going to be looking for right away, that's got to fail first. Well, it's not that, man. What the hell is it? I don't know. Did you check the fingerprints? Yeah, that doesn't work. All those basic things, right? People are paying you to be intelligent. They're paying you to come up with something interesting. Today with AI, honestly, you could probably ask AI, hey, I got a crime scene and a cop goes to the forensics department and he checks all the basics. You name all the basics that you don't want to have. You want to demonstrate those, but they're all going to fail. What would be some other piece of evidence that this person could crack? And just listen, say, give me 5 choices and just pick one and move forward. You're the human. You're still constructing the story. AI is not ruining the integrity of the fact that you wrote it. You're just doing what we used to do, which is make phone calls to people and ask your buddy the same exact question. You call Charles Beaumont or Rod Serling, and I got this thing. It's a really good script, but there's this one scene that's kind of crappy. What would I do there? And they'd, let me think about that, whatever. You still have to pick the words, pick the rest of the action. It's all going to be human, okay? The gap is so basic and fundamental to a script that when you watch the San Andreas Fault movie with The Rock, there's a moment for screenwriters. It's one of the funniest scenes in the film. Just to kind of recap, Rock was in LA. His daughter's in San Francisco. San Francisco has a major earthquake. So they got to get mom and him in a truck up the 5 to get to San Francisco. But this earthquake is massive and it's done a lot of destruction. So they're hauling ass up the 5, which is about 450 miles or so. Take you about 8 hours. And the highway is literally split in half, and it's a gap. It's literally a big crevasse down there, right? And he ends up jumping over. It's funny. So that's a visual gap right in front of your face. Don't do those unless you're kind of tongue-in-cheek and it's a thriller movie or a comedy. Now let's talk about something called the subplot. Subplots are pretty cool. Remember I talked about the 4-act system. 30, 30, 30, 30, right? And again, fourth can go as long as you want. Now take 2 and 3, the 2 center acts of this film, and think about 15 minutes into Act 2 and 15 minutes into Act 3. Separated, if you count the pages between them, by 30 minutes, okay? That's where your subplot can start, and that's where it ends. You can add many, many subplots in your story, but there should be one starting about page 45, and it's going to be concluded about page 75. Sid Fields called this the pinch points. And why did he call them pinch points? Well, Hollywood figured out something. You have spent a lot of the dopamine inside the viewer's mind to get to the end of Act 1, and you spent it. You literally spent it like cha-ching, and all that fluid out of their system. So now they don't have literally the chemicals in their mind to be as charged up about Act 2 and Act 3. So you want to save it up to get to that end of Act 2, right? That big twist. You're going to have all the energy and all the chemicals that you need to experience that point. But they can get bored in the film. Right in the middle of the film, no matter how good it is, they can get bored. So they created this idea of a pinch point. And then they linked it to a subplot. Something fun. Take E.T. I think this was the case in E.T. Well, obviously, E.T. landing and making contact with the family and him getting hidden in the closet was a big part of Act 1. And then, of course, some other shenanigans happen. But a subplot in there, I think, was Elliot going to school and having sort of some hots for a girl. Let's just say that happened, even if it didn't happen. So at page 45, what we can do is say, we see the dilemma that he has a crush on this girl. She doesn't know he exists. But then on page 75, when he and E.T. link, right? This happens in the movie for sure. E.T. is messing around in the kitchen getting drunk, and they're connected consciously. Some little thing we didn't know that was actually taking place. And suddenly Elliot has this telekinesis power, I think in the cafeteria or whatever, and he starts just making everything awesome in the school. And I think he ends up kissing that girl. And it's this amazing scene, right? So you see he likes this girl, and then he ends up resolving it by having this little communion with E.T. back home. He's able to control things, and he kisses the girl. Problem solved. As soon as the movie's over, he can track back to the school, and hopefully she has the same feelings for him, and they can become married and live happily ever after, right? So subplot can link to your main character. Very often it does, and it can link to anyone else. Just some weird unresolved thing. You set it up in the first pinch point and make it interesting, and then you resolve it in the next pinch point, and you're done. Now let's go back to the fundamentals of story. Make it real easy for you, okay? What do they call the good guy? The protagonist. What do they call the bad guy? The antagonist. And then there's all these other characters in the script, and you might get lost if you've never done it before. But I'm going to give you a super simple, cool technique to get this figured out. It will become your cheat sheet until you're finished. This is going to require an analog piece of paper, unless you're like really into drawing and paint applications. But it's so awesome to do this on a piece of paper. You can just have a notebook that's just blank pages. You can work from there. Typically what I do is I pass out 8 by 10 or 8 by 11 pieces of paper, and I have all the students fold it in half to create that crease down the center, right? Then I have them draw a dotted line right down the center of that crease. And then I want them to draw a big circle at the top and a big circle at the bottom. And they write their hero's name at the top and the villain's name, the antagonist, down there in the bottom circle. Then they draw a line between those two circles. And then on one side of the line, they write what the relationship is between these two characters. And that would be the thing that you know about these two folks working together, working against each other in the first act. But a line has two sides, right? So after your turn, after you twist everything up, the other side of the line becomes what's really going on. With my cop analogy in that casino thing, you draw your good cop on the top, good bad cop on the bottom, draw the line between them. On one side of the line, you write they're partners in the LAPD or Las Vegas PD, probably, right? And on the other side you write arch enemies, good cop, bad cop, going to stop. You know, you say an arrow going one way, so-and-so is going to stop the other guy from continuing to rob these casinos. But you have other characters, don't you? So here's all you got to do to figure out your film. And this will help you limit the amount of characters that you create, because every character you create has got to be kind of realized to a certain significant point. Nothing's ever put in a movie that isn't important unless it's like the extra giving a hot dog to a dude in New York, right? From the hot dog stand. The guy doesn't even have a name. He's a hot dog vendor, right? But if a guy has a brother, a mother, a wife, a girlfriend, even a dog, those become circles on whatever side of the fence that they are loyal to. So you draw all of the circles for all the other characters. And then you draw a line directly to the main character that they're associated with, either the protagonist or the antagonist. And then on one side of the line, you draw how they know each other. Sister, supportive sister, sister that hates the guy, right? So that when you look at this piece of paper, it's the entire bubble graph of everyone involved. Now, what gets really cool about this is the following. Let's say someone from the bad side, let's take Superman 1 with Miss Kassbacher, right? Lex Luthor is obviously on the bad side. Superman's on the other side. And what's Lex Luthor's entire thing? He launches 2 nukes, one heading to the East Coast, one heading to the West Coast. And Superman's girlfriend's on the West Coast. It's going to hit some faults. It's going to make a bunch of problems happen. But Miss Kassbacher's mother's on the East Coast. And he gets himself in that all is lost third act, right? He's got a chain around his neck with a big piece of kryptonite on his chest, which has knocked his powers completely out. In fact, he's just struggling not to drown in that pool. Lex Luthor's just the same old villain. He walks off. Gene Hackman walks off. And Miss Kassbacher's in there. And she gets down on the edge of the pool and says, hey, my mother is exactly where that Eastern bomb's going to land. If I take this off your neck, do you promise to save my mother first? And he thinks about it. You know, hero makes decisions under pressure. We'll talk about this in a second. Yeah, okay, I'll do it. All right, she takes it off his neck. He hops out, flies away. He's got a ticking time bomb on his back, right? So she's a bubble down there by Lex Luthor. And she's connected to Lex Luthor. She's his girlfriend. She's his assistant, whatever she is, right? But she actually ended up helping Superman. So if any one of the bad guys is a defector toward the good, or any of the good guys are defectors to the bad, you can start drawing lines across that center point. And then on the side of the line, you write what they're attempting to do. And if there's something else about them that is the conclusion of their character, because she just kind of walks out of the movie, you never see her again. So there wouldn't be anything on the opposite side of the writing. But if there is something, they end up dying, committing suicide, whatever, they do something strange, you write that on the other side of the line. So what they are and so whatever ends up happening to them is what you can choose. But you can change what's on both sides of those lines all you want. That's something I invented, never seen it in a book, but man, is it ever useful. And again, it becomes the cheat sheet the entire time. So what makes a villain and a hero a hero? Well, the famous phrase about a hero is someone that makes crucial decisions under pressure. They make the right decisions under pressure most of the time. And that could be, there is a perfect decision, and as soon as you make it, everything resolves. Those are boring decisions, but that can happen. Other decisions are, well, it's 2 crappy decisions, right? With the missile for Superman, it was 2 kind of crappy decisions. One he threw out into space. That's good. He goes to the other one, and that jeopardizes, I think, was it Lois Lane gets buried in a crevice, right? And he's got to fly backwards in reverse time. Why did the writer get paid? Because the big finale was Superman flying backwards so fast around the Earth, he reversed time. You know, doesn't really work that way, but maybe relative to him it would. But what is it about villains? Because without villains, you don't have heroes. There is nothing to do If Superman could be the kindest, lawful good guy in the entire universe, but if there weren't villains, what would he be? He'd be the Maytag mad man sitting in a crystal castle somewhere in the North Pole. Pretty boring, right? Well, today it's a little more difficult to create antagonists. It is. Why? Well, there's been, I don't know, 50,000 movies made since the beginning of Hollywood. And with television now, oh my goodness, all those channels out there creating their own content, they're burning up every arc that could possibly be told. And in a way, if you're creative, and if you've been thinking about that and you're not part of Hollywood and you haven't necessarily been watching all these films, you might actually have the best antagonist inside of your brain that anyone's ever seen that will then pull all this great stuff out of your hero. You could even have nothing but a bad guy in mind doing really unique things, and you haven't thought about who the hero might be. But you have to reverse engineer your hero to have the capability of stopping that bad guy. Again, a bad guy doesn't have to be a superhero. It's just someone doing something really negative. Typically hurting the innocent and trying to hurt the innocent. I mean, you always have to demonstrate power. We'll get into that a little bit later, but you have to demonstrate what the person can do. And then when they go after the bigger target, you believe they could. But there was a famous actor, and some of you will know this, and I forgot who it was. I learned this in acting class. It's a British actor that consistently played bad guys, and they interviewed him really late in his life. He had 20 years into this, and they said, well, what's it like? I mean, don't you hate playing bad guys all the time? Don't you want to play a hero every once in a while? And the dude said, I don't play bad guys. They said, what do you mean? Oh, no one I've ever played is a bad guy. They're just doing what they want to do. And what he was teaching everyone was no bad guy sees themselves as a bad guy. If they do, that's really shticky and kind of comic booky. Lex Luthor was kind of that way. But he's a comic book character. It's okay if that guy does it. But bad guys are obsessed. They're compulsive. They can't stop what they're doing. Was the Joker with Heath Ledger, did he think he was a bad guy? Nah, when he was in the nurse's outfit and talking about how he's going to watch the world burn, he thinks that's a necessity for the world. He was doing what he thought was necessary, what we all earned. And the only way to make things better was to burn down everything that was made. So when you write your bad guy, it's pretty rare to write them to the point where the dialogue coming out of their mouth is, I know I'm a bad guy, and boy, have I thought some bad things to do, Mr. Hero. You want to write him or her from a perspective of, I'm looking after me. I'm doing what I like to do, and I'm really good at it, and you can't stop me. That's always the attitude of a bad guy. No bad guys think they're ever going to get caught. You think Hans Gruber in Die Hard ever thought he was going to have a problem getting out of the building? Nah. And that's what made Bruce Willis's character so amazing when he finally got him in the end, right? Did Darth Vader once think he was going to lose? No way. That guy thought he was going to make it all the way to the end. Become the Emperor. Did the Emperor ever think he was going to lose? Hell no. That Emperor sat in that chair, especially in Return of the Jedi, when he was just baiting Luke Skywalker to turn to your hate and all that stuff. He was like, I've been here. I used to be you. I used to be that goody two-shoes kid. But I found that, look, I've got an empire. See all the ships out there? See him kicking the shit out of your guys? He was in control. It looked like he couldn't be stopped. And that's what you want to do with your bad guy. He's completely in control up until he's not, which is what we call the fourth act. Oh, you can experiment a little bit with, he gets hurt. He manages to repair himself, but that only makes him kind of stronger, right? How many bad guys have been in fight scenes and they get destroyed with weapons and stuff, but they still walk off. They still escape. And you're like, how is that even possible? Well, that's your thing. So let's take a step back now from that entire environment. Because we've been at the microscopic level for a little while, right? Looking at all the minutia. You want to do a universe stare at your entire world that you have created for this story that you've put together. They typically call it the universe rules. What's your universe like? What they're asking you is, what are the limitations? What are the freedoms? What can you do and what can't you do? Star Wars is a really good one, especially the first three films, meaning 4, 5, 6. The Rebels, well, they had a much more limited universe. They didn't have money. The ships weren't clean in a lot of cases. They were scrapping stuff together. They're under constant surveillance by the Empire. Well, what was the universe for the Empire? Inexhaustible money, inexhaustible technology. You know, they're really just the Nazis, man. They made the most amazing Death Star, something that was inconceivable. That's no moon. Those lines are huge, right? And so you've got an underdog and a villain. Well, it takes a little while for the characters to pull out all of the objectives. Well, yeah, the Empire, I'm new to this movie. I see this Death Star. Wow, it's really shiny and clean. And I've seen the Millennium Falcon. It's a piece of crap. Maybe that's just Han Solo's problem. Maybe it's not the entire Rebel Force's problem. But by the other movies coming out, you start to realize that they were just underfunded the entire time. And they had to be clever and witty to get through the defenses. Remember in Hoth, when they were trying to get all the folks to escape, they had to get that big-ass laser and shoot the main ship out there to paralyze it. Being clever, being interesting. How did they do it? I don't know. That's interesting, right? What was the most significant thing about the entire Star Wars universe? The Force. Until George screwed it up in 97, the Force was the most beautiful creation in a film I think we'd ever seen it, really. You didn't know what it was, but some people have it. And Luke Skywalker had it. Obi-Wan Kenobi had it. Darth Vader had it. If you're not over 50, and depending on how your parents might have shown you Star Wars, whether they let you know about it or you saw a bunch of other rip-off movies, you have to understand when Darth Vader in 1977, at the board meeting that they were having, the first time you really got to see that guy after he took over the Corvette ship and was looking for the plans, right? But once he got in an intellectual environment where it wasn't a battle environment, and that guy goes against him and says, you know, your stupid religion and your hocus pocus thoughts, and the guy goes, boom. And then you hear James Earl Jones, you know, he's just choking the shit out of that guy, right? With his fingers across the room. You have to understand, everybody had goosebumps wherever they could exist on your body. You were just like, oh my God. And it's such a simple thing. There's no visual effect happening, right? It's an actor pinching his fingers and another actor, you know, grabbing his throat and pretending to choke. Cost them nothing. It was sheer brilliance on film. So keep that kind of stuff in mind when you look at stuff. But that was establishing the universe. It was apparent that, you know, we didn't know what Luke had in him until he really got to Dagobah, right? And started taking lessons from Yoda. Obviously, Obi-Wan Kenobi just saying, these aren't the droids you're looking for. And then the guard's like, yeah, these aren't the droids you're looking for, right? He moves on. He had it. And then when he tells Luke in his house, you know, your father used to be a Jedi. I trained him. But then he got murdered by this guy named Vader. Well, that just seeds the brain. And a little clue, most people don't think about it, but that seeded the brain that maybe Luke's got it too. He just hasn't had a chance to express himself, right? To demonstrate his power. But think about your universe rules. What's allowed and what's not allowed. Was the Force in Star Trek? No, because it was literal reality. What are the rules in Star Trek? Well, it depends on what century we're in, depending on if we're Next Generation, Enterprise, Voyager. We don't know. Or we time travel with the Borg and things can change. But it's always technology based. And when they got to the Borg, man, some of that technology was incredible. Even the old series in the 60s, they're bumping into new technology. So have a lot of fun with the universe of each one of the characters. You have a giant universe around the entire thing. What's possible? Are we in Harry Potter where you can have a wand that actually has magic? Or we don't have that? Okay, well then what's the universe of your protagonist? What's the universe of your antagonist? What are they capable of, right? Remember, Superman can fly. Batman can't. Why is Superman able to fly? Well, the writers put him from a totally different planet. That's why he has the capability. Why does kryptonite hurt Superman? Well, that's the element from his planet that takes him back down. What if Batman gets pinched and he can't quite beat this one hero? What do we know he has to do to beat the hero? He's got to talk to his Q guy and figure out some new technology. But Wayne is pretty damn and brilliant himself, so he theorizes things and puts things together and has his buddies help him make it. That's the fun you get to have in your story. And that's why this is like better than playing the best video game you've ever played in your life. Why? Because you're the designer, you're the writer, it's just words on paper, and you get to make it happen. So I talked to you about the demonstration of power. And once you get hip to this one, you're going to watch all the movies you've ever seen, and you're going to go, there it is, there's the demonstration of power. Now, Hollywood used to be different back in the day, and they used to have really huge establishing sequences at the beginning of a movie. They wouldn't necessarily blow everything up at the beginning of a film. Today, sadly, that doesn't happen anymore. You just drop in the middle of a space battle, you drop in the middle of a Civil War exchange. Even if the film is about something completely different, it always has to start with this giant thing that happens today. I'll tell you about a film I wrote for Chris Hemsworth where this became a problem. But it all involves a demonstration of power. One of the greatest films that will show you a demonstration of power outside of Star Wars is The Professional, or Leon, where this assassin from Italy, he's actually a French actor, there's some gangster held up in a penthouse suite. And, you know, it's all the iconic things. He's got submachine gun security around him. He's obviously some gregarious guy. I can't remember if he was doing coke or something, but you kind of get the idea. He's a drug dealer. He's something. And then Leon shows up. And it's one of the most brilliantly written scenes where he's closing in on these guys. He's using guns first. And then he gets to the point where he's killed all the security guards, and he's killed them kind of off screen. So it's mystery, hence, is interesting, right? The writer knew what he was doing. The director knew what he was doing. Until the guy backs up into a closet, and Leon's in the closet. And the more you watch the film, and you watch it again, you will come around the second time, you learn that he says that the knife is the last thing you learn because it is the closest thing. You're going to be really close to your victim when you use a knife, and you got to be the best of the best if you want to be an assassin to get this moment to occur. But if you rewatch the movie after you've seen it and you've learned that rule, when you watch the first act again, the guy backs up into the closet, and here comes Leon with the knife right on his throat. It was using the distance weapons first, closing in, eliminating the security, gets the guy backed up into a closet, and then here he comes with the knife. It's one of the most brilliant moments ever. But that was a demonstration of power. So that anytime we see this goofy guy walking with his plant in one hand and his suitcase of guns in the other hand, or a carton of milk, you have respect for that fictional character. He is demonstrated. He just wiped out an entire penthouse full of very armed dudes. What's another demonstration of power in the movie Professional? I won't ruin the end for you at all. It's when Gary Oldman, a corrupt cop, has a scene that's about to occur that's really gnarly. And I think it was Gary that basically told the director, I got an idea. I think that's the way I've heard this told. Whoever thought this up was ingenious, but without Gary Oldman being Gary Oldman, you don't get scenes like this. And that's kind of a bummer when you write films. One of the things you want to do, and they never tell you this, and this is something that agents do all the time. This is something Hollywood does all the time. They might get a script from you that's pretty cool, pretty amazing. But they'll look at the main characters and they'll go, who the hell would we cast into this role? You know, there's no more guys like this in the world. Currently, we don't have any guys either signed up to the studio for us, meaning they're signed to a different studio, or they just don't exist. So I don't know how we're going to get this film made. Let's go and option it and hang on to it and see if we can find something. With Gary Oldman, you get to make movies like Professional. And that guy that played Leon, I can't remember his name. You get to make these movies. Gary's character in the movie, no idea what his name was. He likes drugs, and he's a cop. It's kind of like a narcotics detective, right? Where there's a scene, I think it's part of Act 1, where he puts this pill in his mouth. It's like a yellow pill, if I remember right. And they shoot the camera straight down on his face. And these are things that you need to come up to speed on. I'm going to get you to the technical part of the script in a second. But he looks straight up and he's got that pill in his mouth. And he cracks that pill with his teeth and then lets it hit him. And then he just goes to this drug trip. Just this, I don't know what the hell the pill was. I don't know if it's meth or whatever, but he pops that pill, has this crazy physical reaction to the pill with his eyes wide open. Just he's going berserk before he goes and does this crazy thing in the movie. I remember that scene. I will never not think about that scene. In fact, every time I've ever been in a smoke lounge and someone mentions Leon or The Professional, I don't think they go by The Professional anymore. Europe released it as Leon, and we now have that copy in our realm. And I say, what's the scene you remember the most in the movie? And they'll think about it, and they'll go, oh, it's that pill scene. And I'm like, yeah, right? That's fabulous writing, fabulous acting, fabulous cinematography, and the director picked the right moments to put all that together. Sometimes you will write a film because you thought of that one scene. You don't know what that cop's going to do, so you invent it. You invent it forward for a little while, then you invent it backwards. And then you look at the whole thing, and then you're like, well, okay, I've created this wild conundrum for this film. I won't spoil Leon for you at all in case you haven't seen it. The ending of that movie is like Usual Suspects. I mean, it's like one of these phenomenal endings where you're like, oh my God, this is so amazing, right? I mean, it's utterly phenomenal. It's the best movie of its kind. But it's okay if you don't have the whole thing figured out at the beginning. Or it's okay if out of those 48 bullets you're supposed to write, you got the center bullets. Maybe you have the turn. The hardest part to write, you've got that first. I think if you could write the turn first and the fourth act second, the first act will write itself. And all the stuff in between will write itself too. Subplots will occur to you as you get to know your characters. Trust me. So now let's talk about the technicality of writing a script. There's a few online tools. I would just be very careful with that. One of the things you don't do anymore is write a bunch of copyright crap all over your script. You want a title page. You want to basically make sure that there's a way to contact you at the beginning. There's mores and continues that you turn off in the software. Nobody wants to see that crap. And that's if something goes to the next page. They'll have it figured out. But there's a big debate that's been solved, which is if you come from Hollywood and you're a super well-respected writer, you're allowed to do a few comments about how the camera moves around. There's other groups that basically say don't ever write anything like tight on the face, pull back, wide shot, all this other kind of stuff. The middle ground is probably where you want to be, but you need to have a lot of information, a lot of knowledge about how to film films. You need to understand there's a wide shot, a medium shot, and a tight shot, right? A wide shot is a whole landscape is in there. But if you write your action properly in your script, it's obvious what the camera angle is. And you don't want to start talking about medium shots and tight shots, especially medium shots. Medium shots are just shoulder up dialogue. Let the director choose medium shots. Tight shots might be that you need to have an indicator on a sci-fi panel change colors, right? It goes from red to green, or green to red. Things are going bad in this thing, right? And then if the guy MacGyver solves the problem, red goes to green. So you could say, just lightly in the script, tight on the button, it flips red. But I'll tell you what, if you just say the button goes red, the director knows what you're talking about. They're professionals. It's exactly what they do. And they, depending on what director might get your script, some of them have massive egos and they'll get pissed off when they see this kind of stuff. Usually someone will edit that crap out before they give it to the director. But what it is the more you start putting this stuff in there, the more that the readers think you're a rookie. And readers are not exactly used as much anymore. Readers are, the whole process of submitting a script now is completely screwed up. You really kind of want to know someone in the business to get in at this point. One of the things that I just recommend is that you have a script ready that'll help you flesh out your story really, really fast. And if you want to, you take it into a novel and you get to self-publish that or get a publisher for it. And that allows you to control your IP. Once you have a book, it's on a shelf and you can give it to a director and say, I really think this is about this, this, and this, and this. You give them the setup. They might look at you and go, how's it end? You just tell them, boom. And they're like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Yeah, it's right up your alley, man. I think you really dig it. Just give it a look through. I've got, don't even tell you got the screenplay written already. When they call you to option, you just simply throw out there, oh, by the way, I wrote a screenplay for it too. I'll just send it over in case that helps you guys out. And believe me, they'll take it. You'll learn a hell of a lot more about your characters when you write the book about it. It is phenomenal. It'll change everything. It'll make it even better. I promised you a story about Chris Hemsworth. So I wrote Cuchulainn for Chris Hemsworth, which was a project he commissioned. And it's about a demigod story that's been around in Ireland since 2500 BC, for real. And it's a story that's been beat up and all this other stuff, but it's about a young kid who's born from a god realm down to the earthly realm in a virgin birth. But it's 2,500 years before the story of Christ. And he's born into the sister of the king, who's a virgin. He's got a little bit of ways to go, right? There's this problem that introduces itself in the kingdom of Northern Ireland that the god Lug pays attention to. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm too old to go down. He sends his one and only son down, sound familiar, through the sister. Boom, he's born. And he's just a baby, so he can't fight any wars right now. And he's pushed off to be raised by a farmer because they don't know if he's a curse or a blessing. So it's the whole story of him eventually solving the problem. And then dying in the end like Christ, right? Because he has to. Because that's a really old story archetype, okay? So I hand the script over, one of the first versions of the script, which I wrote more fairy tale-ish before we kind of decided on where we wanted to go. And I think he was on the plane flying to England to film Rush. And my buddy's sitting next to him, the guy that contacted me to write this thing. His first comment was, well, doesn't look like I have a lot of lines in the first few pages here. He was going to start speaking on the fourth page, but I had to get the kid to 18 years old before Chris can start playing this character. And this was 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago. So, he was Thor at the moment. He could definitely play an 18-year-old kid at this point. And he ages up 10 years in the script, so it would have been perfect for him. So I didn't start it off with a big bang because that's not how the story starts. And they wanted me to make it really accurate to the lore. So, okay, well, what do you want me to do? Make him 30 years old and fighting this crazy battle? It's what I ended up doing was I looked at the whole script and I had rewritten the whole thing by the time I did this. There's a really heavy scene in the middle of this story. And I can't give the audience the whole scene because it's a big turn. But the first half of it is visually stunning. And if you only see half of it, you're totally confused about what the hell's going on. So I took that scene, I cut it in half, and I put it at the beginning of the movie. So he would immediately be on camera, something amazing's happening, it's part of a battle, and you're lost. You're like, who the hell is this? But your main dude's right there, Mr. Sexy is right in the screen. And then we start the story. So it's one way to solve it. It demonstrated a little bit of power, but it also demonstrated his face on camera. So you can get in trouble, is what I'm trying to tell you, if you don't light it up with the bang. Most successful albums that have ever been released have the first track on the album, if not the second track as well, is the big track on the album. It's one of them. It's one of the huge reasons why maybe you heard that track on the radio. If you think about it, Prince, 1999 is the first track on the album of 1999. The Little Red Corvette's the second track. Both those tracks were blasted all over the radio. So you put that LP down and boom, you get two huge endorphin dumps that you've been looking for the whole time, right? So let's pull back again. I've been telling you about writing your script in the screenwriting software. The fastest film I've ever written in my entire life was a concept I laid down probably 10 years before I actually just was thumbing through my one document with all my concepts in it. And I saw this one, I'm like, man, that's actually pretty good. I just written it one night, one paragraph. I was like, this sounds cool. I don't know where the hell it came from. So I did my bullets. I blew out the bullets. Because after you write your bullets, you want to start creating outline bullets underneath. All the little scenes and beats that you might put in that overall sequence, so you kind of know what's really going on in your script. Now, the reality is this. You can write a movie in a quarter. Typically, it's going to be about 4 or 5 months. unless you're really good or you're writing to spec, meaning someone else gave you the entire thing from a studio and they're like, please just write this into a screenplay. We've thought of everything. Just dramatize it out, make it work. You can write those in a month. But it's not uncommon, especially on your first script. It's not uncommon to write for 2 years before you ever touch the screenwriting software. The penalty, if you write in screenwriting software first, is you'll bottom out if you don't know what the hell you're doing, where your story's going, what the ending's all about. In fact, you could even have all those bullets written down, have them all blown out into outlines, and the second you start writing it in screenwriting software, you're so on the hook for making everything pace perfectly, all the dialogue works, you're starting to bottom out. You're like, well, I really haven't thought this really all the way through. So don't feel guilty if your first script, one, takes a long time to write. My first script I finished in 2000 before any other training other than Sid Fields. And I probably was putting it together for 5 years. Now, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, so I was using Sid's techniques and just didn't have all these tricks I gave you. Had anyone sat me down with the tricks I've given you in this particular episode, I can almost guarantee I would have had it done in a year. Then around 2007, I went and started taking all of Robert McKee's class, which is just the intro and the genre class. I got to go to the genre class when it was 4 days, and now it's only 3 days. I think he only did 4 days once. But he said, this is the first time I've ever taught my genre class. It was amazing, right? Thriller movies, comedies. I got to sit in the class with John Cleese, man. And we reviewed A Fish Called Wanda on Sunday. It was amazing, right? Here's the cool thing. Regardless of how long it takes you to figure out what your story is really all about and kind of weave all the cool things together, I will tell you that you want to stay at that outline process for as long as you can. If you can still think up new ideas and new twists and turns in that outline, then enjoy the process because your script is getting better and better. The more you go, oh, you know what I thought about? If that happens there, then I could do this thing up here. And that changes the meaning of this thing up here because I'm going to be dropping this clue down here. I highly recommend putting a mystery, a definite, like blatant mystery spinal cord throughout whatever you're doing. Even E.T. kind of had a mystery spinal cord to it. What is this dude? Where's he come from? What is he really capable of? He's kind of acting stupid in this scene, but he can't be stupid because he arrived in a spaceship. I don't think he's the dog on board. He's one of the actual characters on board. And look what they did. They showed you all kinds of powers he had when he started getting drunk. I rewatched that like a year ago. I barely get emotional in any movies, and I was like, man, it really had it. It really had some crazy things, right? I don't really think I was remembering being 12 when I saw it. It was just such a well-made film, right? So one of the other things you can do when you get your outline pretty well ready to go in the software, and Robert McKee has said something which I think it's a statement of a complete professional where you have no other job. It is true. You can actually write your script in the screenwriting software in about 2 weeks, if you just did, a big chunk of time in your day. However, if you do have a full-time job, don't feel bad if it takes a little while to get that first one out. Don't ever guilt yourself out for anything that's a struggle when you do it for the very first time, especially a novel. My gosh, I think that, folks that can write a book in 6 months to 8 months, if they can write that and it's really good, then they are absolutely one of the greats. They're one of those amazing writers that can conceive of something, blow it out, get it written out, edited and out the door in that kind of time frame. I think that the quickest, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see how fast I can write my second book. I'm assuming it'll just go down by maybe 20%, maybe 40% if I'm really lucky. But if you've just in life in general, if you're doing something for the first time, give yourself an economy that's just as all the money and time that you need to get that first one out. Just make sure you're learning from every mistake you ever made. Every mistake you make is a great thing because you're learning how to get it right. It's like the old philosophy of finding a bug in software. Rookies, you have to teach them, no, it's okay, it's a bug, right? And when you get to be a pro, you're like, yeah, we found another bug. We killed that. Now it's like even more perfect. And when your product can run for 10 years without ever crashing, that's what that's all about. When your film goes down really, really well and becomes a cult classic, You're like, yeah, it didn't just happen overnight. I worked really hard on it, right? But you've heard this cliche I'm about to tell you, which is sort of an overlay onto everything that you've put together. You have these cliches, and they're cliches because they're true. And that is that most films today have a scene that will make you laugh, a scene that'll make you scared, maybe a scene that'll make you angry, and a scene that'll make you cry. What's really fascinating about that is I think that if any story goes for 2 hours or even an hour and a half, most movies don't get made under 2 hours because they're going to spend that money anyway. So why not get it to 120 minutes, right? You will invariably, without trying, those scenes are going to take place. But if they haven't taken place, if you read through your script and you haven't punched those 4 little arteries, right? Know that you've got an obligation of tension and release, tension and release. And that's because of the chemicals in the brain. You have to let some chemicals come back into play. When we had video games that were like Zelda, you worked up to a boss fight, you hit the boss, and then the next thing you do is it's like ding, 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 no problem, build up to the next boss. Even Jaws back in the day, here comes the shark, super tension. They survive, a bunch of stuff happens, maybe someone gets eaten, but then it releases a little bit, but you're a little bit more tense. Your baseline's gone up a little bit, right? It's a jagged pyramid that goes up. That's the way you make video games. You got to keep that in mind. And when I wrote my first film, I did it the Sid Fields way, and I actually recommend, if you got the wall space for this, it's awesome. Get some 3x5 cards. Whole stack of them. For the 4 acts, you're going to write every bullet on one of the cards, and then you put it in chronological stacked order, and then you create a little card that says Act 1, and then you put another card, you put all your cards for Act 2, 3, and 4. I had realized that in my first film, I was killing off a lot of people, and it got absurd. So I started on my card writing a skull on the card. And then I just looked at my health and I was like, oh my gosh, I got way too many people dying in the first half of this film. So I started moving some of the skulls down the pipeline. And that allowed me to breathe. I wasn't creating any tension release. It was all tension. Keep that in mind. Another huge one, depending on how your story goes, depending on what kind of drama you're trying to put in your script, daytime and nighttime are huge mechanisms for you. Daytime is typically, depending on what kind of script you're writing, a good place to put in the release. Why? It's daytime. If you got a villain, typically things aren't happening during daytime. Or if you were to take that sequence that you wrote in daytime and set it in nighttime, well, now it's dark. The whole environment is mysterious. People can hide. People can pop out of somewhere, depending on what kind of film you're writing, right? A horror film. What would be a haunted house film if it was light all the time? So you will have a scene that's beautifully written. It's nighttime. Or maybe you have a daytime scene. And you end up moving those cards around. You start shuffling your bullets because things need to happen before these other things happen. And you'll realize, oops, I wrote a bunch of action that can only take place if it's daytime. I wrote a bunch of action that can only be nighttime. In my book, I've got a scene where I had a guy walk in and it was daytime, but by the time the scene's over, it's nighttime. And I was like, oh crap, this scene's not at night. The next scene he had was during the day. And it was supposed to be the same day. So getting your daytime, nighttime figured out can be really important, because rewriting some of those scenes, you might lose some of the drama in your scene if you got to change the sun. Just keep those kind of things in mind while you're going at it. Now, there's a whole episode I did on character development, but I think I can boil it down for you, at least in this particular section, so it's much easier for your brain. I don't know if you've seen the movie Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise. It's probably one of the best science fiction scripts I've seen in 20 years. I've seen the movie 8 times, and it just never gets old. Tom Cruise does something he has never done in any of his movies, and I won't spoil the film for you at all, but it's set in the near future. He is a very meek character at the beginning of this film. And not like a wimp or something, but he is just a normal guy, let's just say. He's got some skills, but it's not in the kind of be tough nature of things. And it's called the maturation arc. It's where your character matures over the course of your film. Every single film that I've ever seen typically has some sort of maturation to it, except for maybe your old noir films where a detective like Humphrey Bogart is just as badass in the beginning of the film as he is in the end, and all you're watching is his technique. You know, the Maltese Falcon being one of the examples. But in Edge of Tomorrow, the action that tends to happen, Bill Paxton's in this too. He says a famous line, it's all over the web now as a video meme. It's fun. He gets himself into a situation where he literally has to become a soldier in this movie. That's all I'm going to tell you. But he is the last human on Earth to be a soldier. He doesn't have it. And through a really clever Twilight Zone-y kind of situation that occurs, he ends up becoming the best soldier that has ever lived. Let's just put it that way. And so we know Tom Cruise is always playing, Mission Impossible stuff, Top Gun guys. I mean, he's always playing some badass guy. So you need to, when you think about the universe of your characters, usually the bad guys are already at that 10,000 hour moment. They already have everything that they need to have. And regardless of how strong Batman might be at the beginning of one of his movies, he doesn't have necessarily what it takes to stop everything. He throws out everything he's got on his belt, and the bad guy gets away. The bad guy blows up the building or whatever, right? He's got to reinvent himself. And you've seen that in every Batman movie you've ever seen. Only the 60s series probably doesn't have that. But even that, there's the Batman and Robin are talking, well, if he's this way, then that way, So just understand, you're going to do that to your main character all the way through. And that helps you write. So you define your character at the very end, all the accoutrement and everything that they have, and then you subtract it away towards the beginning. And then you have to figure out, how is he going to get a hold of these things? What's going to trigger change? That's another big one. Try to make every scene have some payoff at the end that has the trigger to get to the next level. Why did the guy go to the forensics department to look up any of the evidence? I mean, he was so confident that he understood the crime, he didn't need to go to the forensics place. But there's that one missing thing. Maybe forensics has it. He goes in, he searches, he fails on all the cliche stuff. And then that one thing, he has an epiphany, makes a decision under pressure. And pow, we're on to the next scene. He's better or she's better. Any supporting role that's in your film, they have to grow up as well. They grow up with the main character. So let's talk a little bit about, you wrote a great script, now what? Well, I'm going to tell you from the inside out, the industry is, if you ask anyone in Hollywood right now about the industry of filmmaking, even those that are gainfully employed in this right now, they're going to say, oh, well, it's kind of screwed up. Those that are in, and those that are not, well, it's very difficult to get on the inside. A lot of folks get in through nepotism, of course. A lot of folks get in because they simply met someone serendipitously in their life. Some folks get in because they make a lot of little projects in whatever field that they have. Now, it's not really a lighting guy or gaffer or something like that. Cinematographers have been cinematographers. They've filmed something for lower end projects. Directors, I think it was Joe Kosinski that did Tron Legacy, then Oblivion, then Top Gun Maverick. He had been filming car commercials, but he had this really wild aesthetic. And I think Sean Bailey met him and said, hey, I really like your style. They became friends. Boom, he gets a little slush fund to create the Tron Legacy trailer that was hilariously, intentionally leaked by Disney from Comic-Con. Made it look like some kid just filmed it illegally. They did it. They released it. That's how it works. And we got a great movie out of it, right? Now, there's another saying, once you're in, it's hard to get out. When you try to get in, it's really difficult. So let me tell you something that the legends of the industry have been doing now. Now, super legends that have their own money, Lucas typically just gets his checkbook out and buys it because he doesn't want to be told what to do. He's kind of retired now, but he's over 80 now. So hope he lives to be 400. Spielberg just created Disclosure Project, and it flopped harder than anything. I mean, it's just been panned horribly. I haven't seen it. I have no opinion of it. But there you have a legend. None of the legends, well, I put it this way. None of the normal legends pay for anything of their own. They have the bank account to make a movie exactly the way they want it, but they will not spend any of their own money because there's a high risk today that it gets panned by the studios. And so they can't control the success. They might spend $300 million on a movie, and then the studio goes, oh, we're going to give you $100 million, and we don't think it's very good, so we're not going to give you any real budget to promote your film. So then you have to step in with another $300 million to promote your film. Typically, promotion is exactly the same budget as the film. They'll deny it, but that's always the case. Sometimes a film comes out and gets panned by the audience, and it gets to become a cult classic years later. I'll give you 3 examples. John Carpenter's The Thing got more criticism than any movie I've ever seen, that by the next year, when released on VHS, was immediately a cult classic, and everybody owns a copy if you like that movie. Tron, totally panned. Blade Runner, totally panned. All released in the same month in 1982. 1982, just as a side note, is the golden year of all of Hollywood's entire history. Just go look up on IMDb 1982, and the movies that released that year have been sequeled, remade. And what's funny about it is, I think most collectors of movies own Poltergeist, The Thing, Blade Runner, and Tron. Hardly anyone owns E.T. We've seen it. It's done. We might watch it here and there on streaming, but we don't own a copy of it. But it's one of the most profitable movies ever made in history. Okay. I think up to that point, it was the top grossing movie. And I looked up that Spielberg has actually made more money from his movies than George Lucas. Crazy, right? When you add them all together. So what the pros are doing right now, that it would be one step down from like a Spielberg, right? Is they're turning their scripts that they've been sitting on into books. Because what that does is that shifts the power from you having to find an agent that you have to give away 15% to, and then to the studios, and have it chopped up and destroyed. So people are taking their scripts. No one knows the script even exists, and they turn them into novels. Now, novels do take a lot more work, and you will write and throw away your stuff. It just depends on how much you read. But it is a way for you to own your IP if you can get to that level. I don't have time to teach you how to write a novel because that's just a brutal thing. Once I get mine released and maybe another one under my belt, I can try to kind of fill that gap for you. But I am not qualified to teach that right now in my lifetime. But I just want you to get hip to that's what a lot of folks are doing. So it could be that you are better writing novels than you are writing screenplays. Just understand that's a pretty good vehicle. Just be utterly brutal with yourself about whether or not you got something good or bad. The other one I worked on with some of my students was that I had a class, a bunch of kids were writing scripts, some little tiny ones they didn't need to worry about. Others were trying to write kind of films, full-blown films, and I obviously asked them what the premise is, what the story is. And you get a lot of young folks trying to write kind of their life story or real cerebral when Henry met Sally kind of things. And I always warn them. I say, look, don't take offense to this, but unless you've had an amazing young life, you probably don't have the chops to write this level of script. Go ahead and do it if you got it. But understanding the human condition at that deep level, the people that are buying tickets are typically a lot older than you because they got credit cards and money and they still believe in going to the movie theater. And so I always tell them, why don't you go for a little bit more fantastical kind of story premises if you're really young. One, you've been raised on it for one, but two, you understand a lot of what's been done. You've seen what video games have done with arcs. You've seen what all the kind of Stranger Things episodes have done, right? Maybe you grew up in Harry Potter. So maybe come up with something a little bit more fantastical than these super deep moments. If you've got those chops to write those deep moments, you won't listen to my voice and you will have already written it most likely. And you could have a really wild childhood such that by the time you're 20, you're going on 50 and you are that kid that could pull it off. But unless you really have a massive hook that pays off beautifully at the end, do try to start from a more gamey kind of, I don't mean like video gamey, but just a more playful kind of premise / idea / concept, and get your kind of feet wet with something that'll be slightly easier to write. And then inside that script that's got that more, I don't know, haunted house, thriller, something like that. It doesn't have to be Terminator. It doesn't have to be Transformers. It doesn't have to go out to that level. But experiment with your ability to write those deeper human conditions into those characters. A lot of us think that Empire Strikes Back was the best of the first three films. The script was deeper, a lot more kind of emotion between Han Solo and Princess Leia. There was kind of some affection there, but he still was an egomaniac. And then when Luke Skywalker goes to Dagobah, it's a bunch of introspection stuff that's going on. It's a lot deeper. But I wanted to save this other thing for the very last part, because I figure if you're interested in doing this, you made it to the end here. Robert McKee has something called the controlling idea. The controlling idea is a little rough to put your mind around, but it is the overwhelming thing you're trying to say with your film. A really old one might be love conquers all, right? And it's not a bad arc if you can write some new way to make that express in a film. But it might be something like, it could be something deep like God doesn't save everybody. Where, obviously your hero might make it at the end and might not make it at the end. Maybe the hero, the characters that the hero loves doesn't make it to the end. And you realize, hey, if you believe in God, don't worry about death. You're going to go to heaven anyway. And your loved one will have gone to heaven anyway. So God will take care of you either way. If you survive, you get to have more human life. If you don't survive, you go up to be more spiritual. But that could be your controlling idea for a haunted house movie, for a Western, for a sci-fi movie, for some action movie. And it would be the last words that you would pick out of your brain if someone just pitched this story to you. But it's that controlling idea that every single time you start moving your script forward, remember at the end of a sequence, you're going to let something reveal and it's going to stack up on your character's back to make them mature to the next level. It's going to trigger them to do something different that they would have done. The gaps that you introduce, well, the way they work around the gap might be going through that controlling idea. Could be something as simple as, without challenge, you don't rise to the occasion. The movie Unbreakable with Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson, right? I have a soft spot for that film. I don't think it's the best film ever made, but it was interesting when you finally listen to the dialogue of Samuel L. Jackson telling Bruce Willis's character, without me, you're not this superhero that seems to survive all these disasters that you're ever in. I'm always testing you. I'm always giving you another disaster. I'm always orchestrating your next moment when you have to rise to the occasion because you're unbreakable, right? Sometimes you'll nail your controlling idea from the first day and you'll write your whole script into it. Other times you'll have just bits and pieces of things in your mind you've been thinking about for a decade, and you start doing my little techniques. And you just kind of keep that controlling idea in the back of your brain. Don't let it guilt trip you into not writing. But eventually, you could even finish your film, and it's a masterpiece. And then you're like, what am I really saying in this film? And whatever that is, whatever the overall theme that you're trying to write, that's your controlling idea. Now, the thing I didn't go into, because we could go on forever and ever and ever, are the different archetypes that end up happening in a film. Typically, if they're really overused, they'll talk about your film and say, it's full of a bunch of cliches. But those cliches are arcs. Well, the girl was in distress and the guy saved her and then it went on to the next scene. Yeah, we've seen that 100 times. If you do it really uniquely and classy, they'll forgive you for it. They'll be like, yeah, it had a lot of really traditional stuff. What was it? Project Hail Mary. Fantastic film. Film like the old films back in the day. I won't ruin anything for you, but if you haven't seen it, you owe yourself a good view. It's all the classic archetypes done beautifully. Done beautifully. I was talking to the tattoo artist who gave me all my tattoos. He's about 50 feet that way. And we're talking about Project, he goes, I finally saw Project Hail Mary. And he just starts talking about the elements of the film. And he talked about the ending. He's like, go figure, man, that was the ending. And I was like, yeah, right. And he's like, it felt so good. I was like, yeah, they did it with class. Okay. I would say watch all the cult classic films that are really cult classics where they have something of substance. Like, I don't worry if you don't watch Rocky Horror Picture Show. That was like a cultural classic thing. Or Easy Rider, which was an anti-plot movie with no purpose, which made $60 million for Dennis Hopper, by the way. Cost $300 million or $300,000 to make, and Hopper makes $60 million off of it. But make sure you see your Blade Runners, your Things, your 2001: A Space Odyssey, Clockwork Orange, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, probably even Doctor Strangelove if you're going to get into comedies, and understand how Kubrick did it. I have a whole episode on Kubrick. Highly recommend if you're interested in film. I have a very close proximity to his daughter. And so I brought you a bunch of stuff that I think you'll find very helpful if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty on your film and understand that he did things completely different. You know, this is the way I describe a Kubrick film. His contract with you is this: my film is for your subconscious, but my contract for you, if you're willing to tolerate that, I will make sure that every frame in every scene is gorgeous, meaningful, and interesting. But when you get done with the film, you're ready to watch it again, and there's something that happened to your inner soul is what you're really here for. But I've made this episode because I genuinely believe, after talking to hundreds of dudes at all kinds of different locations, just normal people without any writing skills whatsoever, everyone has a movie in them. You just haven't found it if you haven't seen it yet. You could even be inspired by a film that you watched and you go, there's just something about the Blade Runner world I just love, that Philip K. Dick world. I don't have anything about Blade Runners. I don't want to write a sequel to Blade Runner. I just want to live in that world. So I'm going to create some Shadowrun, cool cyberpunk film. And you'll start jotting ideas down. But there's one last thing I want to wet your whistle with. And this is a reward that you will get the more that you write. I was just telling my chiropractor this story today. I've said this before in previous episodes, but I want you to know how this can get really cool. This is your little Chotsky at the end. I was writing my version of Tron 3, which is called End of Line. If you just look up Tron 3 screenplay on Google, you'll go right to it. It's a real sequel of Legacy. And with AI, maybe we could put this thing together, get the characters aged down and make it happen. David Warner's not alive, so we'd have to do that. But I'm writing Tron 3, and I created a character that was very lovable inside the computer. And our main character, Sam, comes into the computer and meets this little gaggle of folks really quickly. And this guy's just this lovable dude. He's the more technical, nerdy guy inside the grid. He knows how the grid works more than all the other programs. He's not a user by any stretch. And he's mystified by things that Sam can do in the film. But I built this character up, and he was just a cornerstone to turns in the script, is making it happen. I must have been 2 or 3 months into the script, and I'm sitting in my backyard, my old house, bright sunny day, and I'm moving along through the script, and suddenly I hear this voice in my head, and he goes, "You know I have to die, right?" I was like, "What?" Now, just to put this in perspective, the last episode of Twilight Zone, season 1, where Rod Serling's actually in the episode, is all about this phenomenon. And if you talk to I think Stephen King talked about this, other writers and other books have talked about this. This happens. And this is this wild gift that just happens out of the universe. It'll change your whole perspective of what it means to write a story. Because it's almost like you're looking into another universe and you're seeing the other universe and you're simply transcribing it into this universe and everyone's interested. Now, I was in love with this character. And I was like, so I immediately said, "What do you mean? You're like the best character other than Sam, the main character, right? Like, you're the best character. No one, you can't die." And the character said to me, "Exactly. That's why I have to die. You realize my death will mean more to this part of the film than anything else you've written to the date." And I swear to God, I fought this. He showed me exactly how he died in the film. Just immediately in my brain, I was like, oh, I didn't want to see it. So 2 weeks later, I bite the bullet and I wrote it in there. And it's so gut-wrenching, and it causes a chain of events that's really just verklempt, cathartic turns where you're just like, oh my God, if this film had ever been made, that scene where this guy dies might be the pill scene where everybody goes, "What's your favorite scene?" in the End of Line? And it would have been, I don't know, man, when that dude died, I was like, oh, I was so crushed, you know? Yeah, right? But the girl I was dating at the time, I was kind of keeping her up to date on the script, right? And we're at sushi. I remember this. And she knew this character, and I kept building it up. And I'd written the scene that day, and I was like, oh, this is so rough. He's not the only guy that dies in the script, but this is the one that's just really rough. And I narrated the scene up right to the moment. And this person is not very emotional when I tell her things, right? And I said, well, then he gets killed. And this is how it happens, all this other stuff. And I watched her eyes water across the table. Never, ever seen it before or after that moment. But so, just so you know, when you're sneaking in the back of the theater in your brain to see your own movie, you haven't even written it down yet. That also happens. Michael Jackson always said, I hear the music finished, and then I just try to get the studio to do it, right? That's what's going to happen to you. You're going to build up this muscle memory for how to create scenes. You'll go in maybe you go in and you're just blazing. Other times you might hit a block or something like that, but you'll get through those. Don't worry about that. But you might go in and you're just like, well, I listened to the episode. It really was inspiring. Now I'm kind of sitting on a brick wall. Just keep pushing. Just keep pushing. Let your imagination go. Just try to see your film in your brain. Just let go of the world. Clamp it down with your universe rules, right? What can and can't happen. Where are you? What are the sets? What would your main character look like? Pick an actor in your brain. This is what I always do. Even if they could never play the role. I picked Jake Busey in one of my scripts in my brain, but he's too old now to do it. All right, I still keep him in my story so that I can visualize what that guy would do when he was doing movies like Frighteners with Peter Jackson, right? Okay, it was all I needed. So do those tricks too. And you might find that some of these characters live in your brain. But go see that Twilight Zone too. The last one is season 1, Paramount Plus. It's or rent it for 99 cents or whatever. It's great. Anyway, I hope this was fun. I got more episodes coming. A lot of you replied to the fireside chat. I'm probably going to do the Black Apple again. I debated doing it tonight, but I really want to think it through. The Paul McCartney mystery. Oh my goodness. The notes on that from AI was 77 pages long. Okay. So I got to figure out how to sort that out. So anyway, I definitely heard what you said. I can't believe at least 2 or 3 of you picked the Black Apple. That's so cool. I mean, like super bonus for you. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I will see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.